Columbus's arrival, 1492. An Italian guy working for Spain sails west trying to reach Asia and accidentally bumps into the Bahamas instead. Christopher Columbus lands on October 12th and immediately gets confused, calls the locals Indians because he thinks he's in the Indies. He's not. He's nowhere near it. But the name sticks anyway. This kickstarts European colonization of the Americas, which turns into the Columbian Exchange. Plants, animals, diseases, and people moving between continents. It's like humanity's biggest accidental trade deal. Except millions of indigenous people die from diseases they've never encountered. And Columbus himself dies in 1506 still believing he found a route to Asia. It's like confidently walking into the wrong house and insisting you live there. Jamestown, 1607. England finally gets its act together and plants a permanent settlement in Virginia. About 100 settlers arrive in May, pick a swampy peninsula on the James River, and call it Jamestown after King James I. The location is defensible against Spanish ships, but turns out to be a terrible place to live. Brackish water, mosquitoes, no food. Most of these guys are upper-class Englishmen who don't know how to farm. The winter of 1609 to 1610 becomes the starving time, where only 60 out of 214 settlers survive. It's like starting a restaurant when nobody knows how to cook. Eventually, they figure out tobacco farming, which saves the colony. Jamestown becomes America's first successful English settlement, proving that humans will tolerate almost anything if there's money to be made. American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. The war begins April 19, 1775, with the battles of Lexington and Concord. After years of British taxes and control, the colonists finally snap. George Washington commands the Continental Army through 8 years of fighting against the British. The decisive victory comes at Yorktown in 1781, when Washington and French forces trap British General Cornwallis. The Treaty of Paris, signed September 3, 1783, officially ends the war, and Britain acknowledges American independence. It's a small, poorly supplied army beating the world's most powerful empire by basically refusing to quit. Like a kid brother who keeps fighting until his older brother gets tired and walks away. Declaration of Independence, 1776. After years of increasingly annoying British taxes and rules, the colonists finally say, "We're done here." Thomas Jefferson writes the first draft in June, working from his Philadelphia boarding house. The document gets edited by John Adams and Benjamin Franklin. Then Congress debates it for 2 days. On July 4th, 1776, they adopt it. The Declaration doesn't actually make America independent, that requires winning a war, but it's the official breakup letter. It announces 27 grievances against King George III and declares that all men are created equal with rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The signing happens later on August 2nd, with John Hancock's signature so big it becomes synonymous with signature. It's basically the founding document that says, we want a divorce and here are all the reasons why you're terrible. The irony that they're declaring equality while many of them own slaves will take another century to resolve. U.S. Constitution Ratified, 1787 to 1789. After winning independence, the states realized their first attempt at government, the Articles of Confederation, is too weak to actually function. So in 1787, delegates meet in Philadelphia to write a new rule book. They create a system with 3 branches of government that balance each other out, plus a federal structure where states keep some power but not too much. The Constitution gets ratified by enough states in 1788, takes effect in 1789, and George Washington becomes the first president. The Bill of Rights gets added in 1791 to protect individual freedoms. It's the blueprint for American government, written vaguely enough on purpose so it can adapt to future problems nobody in 1787 could imagine. Like trying to write assembly instructions that work for furniture that hasn't been invented yet, except it somehow does work. Louisiana Purchase, 1803. Napoleon Bonaparte suddenly needs cash and decides to sell France's entire Louisiana territory to the United States. President Thomas Jefferson sends negotiators to buy New Orleans for $10 million. They come back with 828,000 square miles for $15 million. Basically the entire middle of the continent. That's about 3 cents per acre. The purchase doubles the size of the United States overnight. Jefferson, who normally follows the Constitution strictly, can't find anything in it that says the president can buy territory, but the deal is too good to pass up. So he does it anyway and sorts out the constitutional questions later. It's like going to the store for milk and coming home with the entire grocery chain. The purchase eventually becomes 15 states, transforms America into a continental power, and proves that sometimes impulse buying pays off spectacularly. Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. The U.S. annexes Texas in 1845. Mexico gets furious and disputes over the Border Spark War. President Polk sends troops to the Rio Grande in January 1846. Mexican cavalry attacks in April, killing about 16 U.S. soldiers. Congress declares war May 13, 1846. General Winfield Scott captures Mexico City in 1848. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed February 2, 1848, ends the war. Mexico loses about one-third of its territory, roughly 525,000 square miles that become California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, and Oklahoma. The U.S. pays $15 million. Its manifest destiny in action, forcibly acquiring half the Southwest because Americans believe they're destined to stretch coast to coast. The debate over whether these new territories will allow slavery will help trigger the Civil War. Civil War, 1861 to 1865. Decades of tension over slavery finally explode after Abraham Lincoln wins the 1860 election. 11 southern states secede to form the Confederate States of America because they fear Lincoln will end slavery. The war starts on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fire on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. For 4 years, the nation tears itself apart. The North has more people, more industry, and more railroads. The South has better military leadership early on and strong motivation to preserve their way of life. Around 620,000 soldiers die, more than all other American wars combined until World War II. Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, freeing slaves in rebel states and reframing the war as a fight for freedom, not just unity. In April 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse. The war preserves the Union and ends slavery, but at a catastrophic cost. It's America's bloodiest divorce that ended in staying together. Emancipation Proclamation, 1863. On January 1, 1863, Lincoln officially declares that all enslaved people in Confederate states are free. It doesn't free slaves in border states loyal to the Union, and only applies to areas in rebellion, places where Lincoln technically has no control. So it's a military order that frees enslaved people where the Union Army isn't, and doesn't free them where it is. But it changes the war's purpose from just preserving the Union to ending slavery. It also lets black men enlist in the Union Army, around 186,000 do, and 38,000 die fighting for freedom. It's a strategic war measure that Lincoln justifies as necessary to win, and it shifts international opinion firmly to the Union side. European countries that were considering helping the Confederacy now can't, because they'd be supporting slavery. It's like announcing you cleaned your room when really you just swept everything into the closet, except eventually you actually have to clean the whole house. 13th Amendment, 1865. The constitutional amendment that finally abolishes slavery everywhere in the United States gets ratified on December 18, 1865. Section 1 is straightforward. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. The except as punishment for crime loophole will later enable convict leasing and mass incarceration, but in 1865 it's a monumental achievement. The Emancipation Proclamation was a war measure that could be challenged in court. The 13th Amendment makes it permanent. It takes the Civil War and 600,000 deaths to get here, but slavery is finally illegal nationwide. It's America finally fixing the massive contradiction built into its founding, declaring all men equal while millions were enslaved. Though really, it's less fixing and more beginning the century-long process of fixing. Spanish-American War, 1898. The USS Maine explodes in Havana Harbor on February 15th, 1898, killing 266 sailors. Nobody knows what caused it, but newspapers blame Spain, and Americans scream, "Remember the Maine!" Congress declares war on Spain April 25th, 1898. The war lasts 4 months. Commodore George Dewey destroys the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay on May 1st. U.S. troops land in Cuba, win battles at San Juan Hill and Santiago. Spain surrenders. The Treaty of Paris, signed December 10, 1898, forces Spain to give up Cuba, cede Puerto Rico and Guam, and sell the Philippines to the U.S. for $20 million. America goes from continental power to global empire overnight. It's the moment the U.S. becomes a world power with overseas territories. World War I, 1917 to 1918. America tries to stay out of the European War until Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare and the Zimmermann telegram pushed the U.S. to declare war on April 6, 1917. About 2 million American troops deploy to France. They arrive just as Allied forces are exhausted from 3 years of trench warfare. American forces help turn the tide at battles like Belleau Wood and Meuse-Argonne. Germany signs the armistice on November 11, 1918. Over 116,000 Americans die. The war establishes America as a major world power and sets up the conditions for World War II 20 years later. It's America's first time getting deeply involved in European affairs, proving it can project military power across the Atlantic. Great Depression, 1929 to 1939. The stock market crashes on October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday, and the entire economy collapses. Banks fail, businesses close, unemployment hits 25%, people lose their homes and farms. Bread lines stretch around blocks. It's the worst economic disaster in American history. President Herbert Hoover's response is basically wait it out, which doesn't work. Franklin D. Roosevelt wins the 1932 election, promising a New Deal, and immediately starts launching programs to put people back to work. The Civilian Conservation Corps, Tennessee Valley Authority, Social Security. The government takes a much more active role in the economy. Some programs work, some don't, but collectively they prevent total collapse and establish the idea that government should help during crises. The Depression doesn't fully end until World War II mobilization creates massive demand for workers and production. It's like the entire economy fell down the stairs, and it took a decade and a world war to get back up. Pearl Harbor, 1941. On December 7, 1941, Japan launches a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. In less than 90 minutes, Japanese planes destroy or damage 19 U.S. warships and 300 aircraft, killing over 2,400 servicemen. Almost half the dead are from USS Arizona, which sinks within minutes. America tries staying neutral, but this attack drags the U.S. into World War II. The next day, Roosevelt calls it a date which will live in infamy, and Congress declares war on Japan. It's Sunday morning, forces are completely unprepared, and suddenly America is in a global war, like getting ambushed at breakfast and then having to fight on 2 continents for 4 years. World War II, 1941 to 1945. America tries to stay out of another European war until Japan attacks Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The surprise attack kills over 2,400 Americans and drags the United States into both the Pacific and European theaters. America mobilizes completely. Factories convert to war production, women enter the workforce in massive numbers, and 16 million Americans serve in uniform. The Allies defeat Nazi Germany in May 1945 and Japan in August after the U.S. drops atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war costs over 400,000 American lives, but establishes the United States as a global superpower. The U.S. emerges with the world's strongest economy and military, leading the creation of the United Nations and NATO. It's like being the last one standing after everyone his house burned down, then using that position to redesign the whole neighborhood. The war also accelerates civil rights movements, technological advances, and America's shift from isolationism to world leadership. Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975. After France loses its colony in 1954, Vietnam splits at the 17th parallel, Communist North under Ho Chi Minh, Anti-Communist South under Ngo Dinh Diem. U.S. military advisors arrive in 1955 to train South Vietnamese forces, trying to stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. It starts small, just advisors and equipment. Nobody thinks it'll turn into America's longest war. But over the next decade, the U.S. gets pulled deeper and deeper into someone else's civil war. We'll come back to how this ends. JFK Assassination, 1963. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy is assassinated while riding in a motorcade through Dallas, Texas. He's shot around 12:30 p.m. and pronounced dead at 1 p.m. at Parkland Memorial Hospital. Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine, is arrested and charged with the murder. 2 days later, Oswald is shot and killed by nightclub owner Jack Ruby on live television. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson is sworn in as president aboard Air Force One at 2:38 p.m. The Warren Commission later concludes Oswald acted alone, but conspiracy theories never die. The assassination shocks the nation, ends Camelot optimism, and becomes one of those where were you when moments, like watching the future get shot in broad daylight on national television. Civil Rights Act, 1964. After decades of organizing, protests, boycotts, and struggle, President Lyndon B. Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act into law on July 2nd, 1964. The law outlaws discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It ends segregation in schools, the workplace, and public accommodations. You can't have whites-only water fountains anymore. You can't refuse to hire someone because of their race. It's the most important civil rights legislation since Reconstruction, passed after the March on Washington-Birmingham campaign and the assassination of President Kennedy. The law doesn't instantly fix racism. That's not how laws work, but it removes the legal framework that enforced racial segregation. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and thousands of less famous activists risk their lives to make it happen. It's America finally making good on the promise written in the Declaration of Independence 188 years earlier. Still a work in progress, but it's a massive step forward. Vietnam War. Now let's get back to Vietnam War. So the Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964 leads Congress to authorize a military force. President Johnson sends combat troops in 1965. By 1969, over 500,000 Americans are there. The war features guerrilla tactics, search and destroy missions, and massive bombing campaigns. The Tet Offensive in January 1968 is a military defeat for North Vietnam, but a psychological victory that convinces Americans the war is unwinnable. Protests erupt across America. Nixon begins Vietnamization in 1969, gradually withdrawing U.S. troops while expanding the war into Cambodia and Laos. The Paris Peace Accord signed in January 1973 end U.S. involvement. On April 30th, 1975, North Vietnamese forces capture Saigon and the South Vietnamese government surrenders. Over 58,000 Americans die, along with an estimated 2 million Vietnamese. The war bitterly divides America, spawns massive protests, and becomes the symbol of a failed intervention. It's fighting for 2 decades in someone else's civil war, spending billions of dollars and thousands of lives, then losing anyway. Moon landing, 1969. On July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin become the first humans to walk on the moon while Michael Collins orbits above. Armstrong steps onto the lunar surface at 10:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time and says, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." They spend about 2.5 hours outside the spacecraft, plant an American flag, collect samples, and talk to President Nixon. Over 600 million people worldwide watch on television. It's the culmination of Kennedy's 1961 goal to land on the moon before the decade ends, and America wins the space race against the Soviet Union. It's humanity leaving Earth for the first time and proves what's possible when a nation decides to do something impossible. Watergate, 1972 to 1974. On June 17, 1972, 5 burglars are caught breaking into Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex. The burglars are connected to Nixon's re-election campaign. Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, Fed leaks by source Deep Throat, uncover massive political espionage directed by White House officials. Nixon orders the FBI to halt investigation, fires the special prosecutor, and covers up his involvement. The Supreme Court orders Nixon to release White House tapes in July 1974. The tapes provide undeniable evidence of Nixon's complicity. Facing certain impeachment, Nixon resigns on August 9, 1974, becoming the only U.S. president to resign. It's a third-rate burglary that brings down a president and proves nobody is above the law. Turns out the cover-up is always worse than the crime. September 11th attacks. 2001. On the morning of September 11, 2001, terrorists hijack 4 passenger planes. 2 hit the World Trade Center towers in New York, 1 hits the Pentagon, and 1 crashes in Pennsylvania after passengers fight back. Nearly 3,000 people die. It's the deadliest terrorist attack in history. The entire country watches it happen live on television. President George W. Bush declares a war on terror, and within weeks, the U.S. invades Afghanistan to go after al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Congress passes the Patriot Act, expanding government surveillance. Airport security transforms forever. In 2003, the U.S. invades Iraq. The attacks reshape American foreign policy, domestic security, and how Americans view safety. 2 decades later, the U.S. is still dealing with the consequences. Endless wars, expanded executive power, normalized surveillance. It's the moment modern America's sense of invulnerability shattered, and everything after feels different. COVID-19, pandemic, 2020s. A novel coronavirus emerges in late 2019 and spreads globally in 2020, triggering lockdowns, business closures, and over 1 million American deaths by 2024. The pandemic exposes massive healthcare inequities, disrupts supply chains, and forces the entire economy to shut down temporarily. Schools close, hospitals overflow, and people work from home in unprecedented numbers. The government passes trillion-dollar relief bills. Scientists develop vaccines in record time. Masks become political statements. The pandemic accelerates remote work, e-commerce, and digital transformation, while devastating small businesses and widening in economic inequality. It's the biggest public health crisis in a century, killing more Americans than any war except the Civil War. The long-term effects, economic disruption, political polarization, mental health impacts, are still unfolding. It's like the entire country pressed pause for 2 years, then hit play again without agreeing on what actually happened. If this helped you understand American history, hit that like button and subscribe for more history explained simply. Thanks for watching.